doing what we have been doing on the WIPE project, which is a project which has been financed by the European Commission, in which different partners from different countries participate, and specifically University of Deusto, where this is my organization that I'm representing today. It is the one which is have to deal with the intervention strategies to understand better the users and the families behind the potential interventions that we can design for them. So with all this introduction, let me again remember to you that my name is Diego Casado, and I have prepared this presentation today with a colleague which is called Armando Aguayo. Behind of this also and is present in this call, it is Cruz Borges, who is the IP or the person or the principal researcher of the Deusto project, the WIPE project, sorry. So that's all for as the introduction. Before to start with the talk, I will be happy to answer to any question at any point. There is like we can make the presentation a kind of more interactive if you want. So if you would like to jump in at some points, it might be the case that you can raise your hand or just write a short chat, and I will try to answer if there is something that it is unclear or something that you would prefer for me to explain in a different way. Okay, so then of course at the end of the presentation I have thought on having a chat with Q&A, but again, if you would like to know something specific in the meantime of my presentation, please just write a short notes message, because I am having in front of the chat, and I will be able to stop and trying to answer your questions. Okay, so let's gonna start with what we have prepared. So first of all, let's gonna make an overview of the objectives for today's skills workshops. Okay, so as a workshop, it is like it's a talk, but at the same time, it is something that you have to take some takeaway messages from you, and something that it will be valid for your research endeavors. So the ideas that I have proposed for today's presentation is overall to explain the methodology that in the WIPE project we have followed to understand the household-related behavior when it comes to take an investment decision for the energy transition. And when we speak about the energy transition in the WIPE project, we are tackling the next building blocks, which are energy efficiency, distributed generation, demand response, sometimes flexibility, but not so much, and electrification of services, and also transport. That was also very important for the project. So I will present some of the results, but not into many detail, because this is not a presentation from the WIPE project, but more in a broad perspective. Something that I think that might be interesting for you for your projects, it is that I'm going to explain to you an heuristic tool that we are designing that can help decision makers. I don't know whether in the audience today there are some policymakers or people who really have the power to take decisions when it comes to foster a change, and we will see which are the different strategies that we might put in place when trying to engage more the population for doing some of the decisions over the energy transition. Okay, so that's the idea. So, but first of all, I would like to introduce a little bit the WIPE project that I'm representing today, with some of always the background that we usually use in the presentations. So it is true that the energy transition always just and always without leaving anyone behind is a truth fact, but at the same time it lays on the shoulders of the people of the household, and the people who the inhabitants of the different cities and villages. But in general, it's true that we understand in why the household owners and tenants are not really characterized by always taking rational decisions. because when we review the current body of knowledge, we found that sometimes there is an assumption that the household will always take the rational decision making, which is not the case, that we can stands for. And again, if the model for the users and the households, tenants and owners, it is not socioeconomic, it is not always economic driven by economics decisions, it is difficult to really use traditional models to model how the decisions that they're gonna take will occur, okay? So that is a general thing that we thought, not only for the general transition, but all for many other aspects. So we think that with the Y project, we cannot really apply the typical decision models, and we are trying to do something a little bit different, okay? So initially, you can think, okay, so if we can model, why not to use typical AI algorithms for doing that? Yeah, that may be working for us, because usually it is nice that whenever we would like to train a machine learning model for understanding, for example, inferring some parameters or some variables, usually that works very well when we extract some part of the population, we test our models, and then we see whether the outcomes from our model really fits on the population that we really have, the whole population. But the thing is that in the Y project and in many of the projects that you are maybe involved in, we usually run interventions. And when we run an intervention trying to change the people behavior, or trying to change the way in which the people behave or take decisions, we are actually changing as well the data. So again, if we change the data and we change the decision making of the people, we are changing the population at the same time. So usually that is where the problems from traditional methods that not really fit very well. So what was our approach in the Y project? So we are more oriented to causal modeling. So maybe you are familiar with causal modeling. This is not something super new, while it is still now getting more into the hype. And overall, because the causal models provide some features or some characteristics that no other models cannot render for being valid. First of all, just for letting you know something about the causal modeling, they are a generalization over the structural equation models. In some words, so you can really understand which are the effects, positive or negative, between different variables being categorical or being ordinal. The models are not always based on data, but also the expert information and the overall expert data. It is also something that we can incorporate on the models, and this is something which is really helpful for understanding better what are the causalities for the different things. Something which is also very important is that they are falsifiable and identifiable, which means that we can really test whether the models that we are trying to create really are working as we expected. Something that was that they outperform the traditional AI models is that they are very robust and the intervention scenarios, because really we can understand, for example, what might be the changes if we apply one policy change, for example, or if we apply one intervention, we can really understand better the impacts that they will have over the variables that we are investigating. Contrafactuals can be applied over causal models, and something that we love, it is that they are easy to explain and easy to understand even for people who really don't know a lot about AI, which are nice, okay? But today we are not gonna speak about AI models, not a lot of causal modeling, but more about how can really I foster a change over my target population. So and I assume that if you are today in this talk, it is because you have some interest or over for yourself as maybe as an intervention designer, as a person with power for making changes. What can I do for helping the people to transition towards a more sustainable lifestyle, towards a more and live a world in which transition to a more energy efficient lives. So therefore, there are some questions that we are gonna cover today. The first one, it is really understand what are the changes that I would like to promote, and I will explain to you what are the changes that we are trying to promote in why. If I know my target audience, I will give to you some ideas about how we can get more familiar with the population that we are trying to change or convince to do something. Then it is important that as an intervention designer, we know a series of strategies, incentives, policy changes, or regulations that may be very effective for different scenarios. And then we will cover how all these questions interrelate with each other. So then we can start with the most important part, which is understanding what we would like to do. Because this is the first important question that we have always to say. Because, for example, if I explain, starting to convert the today skill workshops by giving to you a list of potential strategies or potential interventions to do, first of all, it is nice better to better understand what we would like to change. And in why we have tackled 4 different aspects of the energy transition. So we tackle building, which entails the heating and insulation of the different buildings, flexibility, which entails distributed generation, as I told before, storage of energy, models for flexibility, aggregators, and so forth. Then we also tackle energy efficiency by understanding how people really use their everyday appliances. And this is not only about energy efficiency by buying more energy efficiency appliance, but also about how can the shared economy can help reducing costs, or how the sufficiency measurements can really be effective while we would like to reduce the bill and the footprint that we have as a users, okay, as human beings. And the final one, which is also very important, as I said before, is the one related with the transport and the one related with the mobility. So we are going to tackle decision making, and something that usually comes to our mind whenever we say transport, what we say is, hey, which are the incentives that we can give to the people to buy a new electric car? But we can also think in another way around, what might be like, what are the incentives that we can give to the people to sell their private car at the start just using public transport? So those are the things that we are tackling in the Why project, okay? So for understanding the different aspects and the different strategies that we will provide for each of the different building blocks, all the big blocks that I have explained before, we assemble a panel of experts per each of the different panels, where the panel of experts were interdisciplinary, intersectorial, international, and gender, and we try to cover the gender balance. But this is just some data that I wanted just to show. So we we put many people on thinking on the different aspects from the energy transition, as I said, with these important things. And something for you that might be interesting is that whenever we would like to know which are the objectives that we would like to change, or what are the things that we can do, it is very nice as an exercise to make the people think not only in the scenarios that they have in real life. So, for example, where we live every day, how we transport every day, but to provide to them potential prospective and speculative scenarios for the potential futures. And for that, we use a kind of theory base called speculative scenarios, in which we can provide to the we provide it to the experts, which is the baseline scenario that we are dealing with today. So in 2023, which is the minimum scenario that we understand that should be done for attaining the zero net energy objectives by 2030. But what might be like a probable, a plausible, an ideal situation for each of the different scenarios. So the speculative scenarios is a theory that comes from the science fiction sometimes, also for human-computer interaction applications and other fields. But we wanted to bring this theoretical approach for really deep imagining what might be like the preferable or plausible or possible visions from the different people when it comes to cover and to tackle the different aspects that will help the people to transition to the to a more sustainable world. Okay, so for example, trying as an example the way in which we approach it, one of the aspects, we put the focus on the mobility, for example, and the baseline it is like, okay, we have the fossil fuel cars, and the minimum thing that we can do, and this is something that we are observing right now, it is that, yeah, so people are promoting to maybe purchase electric vehicles. But maybe another probable possibility would be, like, as I said before, let's gonna see what might happen if the life that we would like to see, it is where the private cars that not exist or they are lower number than right now, and the people will embrace more the public transport. Another one might be like, let's gonna see that there is no any kind of card, and everything that we also have in a plausible scenario are robot taxis to help the people to move around, and also for the mid and long distances from the different countries. And the ideal scenario, of course, it might be the cities of 15 minutes where actually the car and the private vehicle is not needed, but only for large distance transportation. So for each of them, well, this is a description that I'm not gonna get into detail, but something that was very nice is that we asked to them, to the experts, to provide three different things. We asked for the different scenarios to provide what might be the intrinsic and intrinsic determinants that will help the people to take an investment decision. Okay, so how can we invest money and time and effort on bringing those potential scenarios a reality? What might be the barriers that may hinder the investment of the people while thinking on those ideal scenarios? And also something that also for understanding better which are the actions that we have to do for the step by step, we listed a series of actions to transition from one scenario to another. So starting from the fossil fuel, we listed the actions to go to the minimum, to the probable, to the plausible, and to the ideal. Okay. So that was what we did for understanding better the objectives that we have. Then, once we have the objectives, then it was super important for us to understand which is the population that we are going to work with. Okay. And for that, we are going to still start now to use the word archetypes, because this is the word that we use in Y for defining the personas, maybe, or the profiles, or the segments of the populations that we understand that are important whenever we need to approach them to provide specific nudges or hints or information or policy change for helping them to transition towards those scenarios that I presented before. Okay, so what are archetypes? It might be the case that it is the first time that you listen to this term. It might be the case that not. So for us, the archetypes are just symbolic images that we all unconsciously understand. So for example, I'm taking like a role play that we took as an example to explain that. For example, we might have the hero with some characteristics and what some challenges: the sage, the innocent, the lover, the caregiver, the citizen, the rebel, jester, explorer, and so forth. Okay, so for each of those archetypes, in any play, for role play, or whenever we try to understand better the population, so we understand that the archetypes are people who represent a portion of the population, and that we can really give to them some specific characteristics that makes them very different from the others. So that will help to us to really segment the population that we would like to work with, to understand how they will what are their beliefs, which are their behaviors, which are their concerns, which are the drivers that will make them go from one place to another. Okay, so this is what we try to do with the archetypes. So in a more now, or forgetting the role playing of the games, and now going for what the archetypes that we have in the Y project. So we found after doing a lot of analysis of the population with we would like to work in the European Union, we founded 8 different archetypes that we might have on the whole population when it comes to make decision changes for transition to a more sustainable world. And we found like the early adopters, it is one of the archetypes, the careful, the uninterested, the stubborn, the influencer, the fearful, the homo economicus, and the activist. I'm going to present them into some detail, but not in many detail, just for you to know that we have used those archetypes to better then provide tailor-made strategies to help them to transition to one scenario to another. Okay, so for that we use the play of cards for understanding better the different roles, and just for with the population that we have, that was a sample of I don't remember exactly the number, but something like more 2,000 people or something. We obtained that the majority the role that was more present on the population that we explored, doing a cross-sectional study across the whole European countries and well balanced by the European countries. We found that the fearful, followed by the influencer and the careful, are the salient roles, also with the early adopter being very close to the careful, as well as main roles that we might have. Okay, but maybe those roles just can, by the name, can give to you some ideas, but still maybe do not be super well, you might not have very clear what they are about. So I'm going to provide to you a very short description of each of the different archetypes that we think that we are present on the population, of course with some limitations, because we might left some archetypes behind, but we think that we can represent a very big portion of the population by having those archetypes. Okay, so the way in which I'm going to present the archetypes is that I'm going to give them the name. For example, homo economicus, as I said before. I'm going to give to you which are the motivation and values behind each of the different archetypes, how they make choices, which are the social interactions aspects that navigate, for example, as for them to take decisions, which are the outcomes and the behaviors that they would like to pursue, and a summary of the archetypes. Okay, so for example, starting for the early adopter, and the early adopter for us represents those people who are forward thinking and eager to embrace new technologies or practices. They are often driven by a sense of responsibility towards the environment. This group may be among the first to invest in renewable energy technologies, for instance. So in that specific characters, that represents a very important portion of the population, the motivation, the values that they have is, of course, the responsibility, environmental consciousness, the personal significance and knowledge. The way in which they take decisions is always to evaluate the choices based on impact or on satisfactions. They try to avoid sexist bragging, because they would like just to maybe to show off a little bit about what they are doing, but not at all, a lot. They navigate peer pressure and desire for novelty. This is what it drives them to make changes. And the outcome of the behavior that they may have is to stay true to decisions and serve achievements in a balanced manner. And overall, they are characterized by responsibility, knowledge, commitment to significance. But this is the way in which we try to describe, for example, the early adopter. Now we have all the description in the next 8 slides. I'm not going to get into so many detail, but only I would like to read maybe just the banner for each of the different roles, for you to have an idea. Then the presentation has been put on the folder that Mariangela told to me, so I think that you might be able to download the presentation. Mariester, sorry, Mariester. So you might have more time for getting more familiar with the different clusters of the population. So then we have the uninterested, and they, in that case, where these individuals will make decisions based on existing norms and regulations. They might not be the first to adopt new energy-saving technologies, but they will if it aligns with their values or becomes a standard or a required practice. So the interested people are the people that really don't really make any effort for transition for the to more sustainable technologies or more sustainable decision making. But if they have been imposed by a regulation, they will follow that. Okay. So then we have the Homo economicus, which is the typical model, as I told before, that always the people who try to model the behavior thinks that every one of us think in that way, where it is not true at all. So, and this archetype is the one who represents the calculated decision maker, always analyzing at any moment cost versus benefits. They will invest in energy saving only if it makes a clear financial sense or offers tangible benefits to him or to her or their family. So this is the Homo economicus. Then we have the fearful, which is driven by the desire for security. They might invest in energy-saving technologies if they believe it will provide financial stability of safeguard their future. So there are people that really tries to always keep themselves or their families very safe, in the safe side. Then we have the stubborn, which the name might be like a kind of, so we thought many different ways for calling to this archetype, but maybe the stubborn, this doesn't tell to you exactly what they have. So for us, the stubborn is the people who is really passionate about environmental causes. They will likely to be advocates for renewable energy. It is the first one that in a community tries to always bring the ideas and proposals for always provide energy-saving technologies and sustainable practice. So it is the people that it is really likely all the time by proposing different things. Then we have the influencer, and also we have this interrelated influencer with the influencee, so the people that it is influence others, but also the people who is easy to be influenced. And usually the influencer is people that the decisions are socially driven. If energy saving, for example, becomes trendy or popular, they will adopt them and they will try to influence other people to do the same. So that's the influencer. Then we have the careful. And the careful, it's the people who need all the facts and assurances, before making a decision. They will invest in energy-saving technologies if they are convinced of the benefits and if it is deemed a safe and informed choice. So this is the people that always again, they seem to be like close to the fearful and close to the Homo economicus, but still with some nuances and differences among their roles. And finally, the final role that we found, for example, was the activists, which are people who are strongly driven by their beliefs. They will proactively seek out ways to save energy and reduce environmental impact. They might also rally others to do the same because, well, they are activists. And they usually try to do, not always aligning with the policy regulations that the time give to them, but also maybe in a more rash manner, okay? Okay, that was, there were the list of archetypes that we found over by using, again, a sample of the European population, after running a cross-sectional survey. But maybe your question might be, okay, if I'm gonna do this on my project or for my future endeavors on energy efficiency, what might be the way for understanding which are my population? So, for example, you can replicate what we did in WILD, which was to run a survey over your population. And the WILD method was based on 32 items, questions related to drivers when it comes to decision making. And depending on the answers that the people gave to these 32 items with the tool, we cluster them in the 8 archetypes. So right now, for example, if we have a population and we give to them the survey that we designed for them, we can really understand which is the cluster in which they will fit better, okay? That is one option. Another option, which is like a rule of thumb, it is like, but okay, I don't want to have time to explore how my population is. So what I'm gonna do is to say, hey, what is the majority archetype that you have when you explore European countries? As I said before, the most important archetypes were the fearful, the influencer, the careful, and the early adopter. So, well, let's gonna think that the majority of my population will fit over those 4 characters. And that might be another way to think about the population. So maybe now you have reduced the complexity of the problem because you have smaller segments over the people that you may have. And another way for doing that, it is to say, okay, I don't want to put a lot of effort for asking them 32 items to be answered. But for example, if I might have some information of my population, such as socioeconomic data, can I really correlate the socioeconomic information with the clusters that you have already explained? That might be a possibility, and this is something that we are exploring. And there are some characteristics which can help us to really understand that some of the socioeconomic data might be also important information to understand which are the salient archetypes on one population. Okay, so and we are so this is one part from the presentation. So the next part from the presentation is like, okay, we have already understood which are the objectives we have, which we can understand which is the population we have, but now we have to really think, okay, the people will make choices, the people will make decisions, the people will have to invest money, time on bringing new decisions when it comes to make options for the energy transition. Okay, so how the people take decisions. So when we wonder that in the project, we say, okay, so the first option might be like, maybe the yes/no decision model, this is not the way that we usually do. For example, imagine that, again, I would like to, for example, start giving up of using my private car. I'm not in that moment because I like very much to travel, but and I have family. So, but in my case, it will be like one day I will wake up from the bed and I will say, hey, yes, or hey, no, this is not for me. Before to do that, I have to really usually go into different stages. So in the Y project, whenever we would like to approach the way in which the people will transition from starting to thinking over the problem or the concern and to when the people really take a decision, that makes this is a time frame which might be shorter or longer depending on the different archetypes, but also we have to understand that the people usually will transition from one stage to another. So for example, again, for the public transport thing, if I, for example, one day I can wake up from the morning and I say, maybe it's time to cut off emitting so much CO2 from my private car. Okay, but which are my options? I don't know. So I have to consult first my friends what they are doing. For example, I might consult the news, I might consult the Google, I might consult ChatGPT to see the options. And then we will see, now that I know the options, I might start to contemplate some of the different actions that I might do. Like, for example, okay, I might only use my private car only on the weekends, or yeah, so the changes, I wanted to say that the changes are not always occurring one day. So there is like a time frame and a time lapse of time in which we transition from the pre-contemplation to contemplation, to be prepared to make the change, to actually make the decision to really sell the car and to start adopting the public transport. But for example, before we have to ask, okay, is there any public transport for me for going to work every day? If not, maybe I cannot do what I would like to do because I don't have. Do I have a bike? It is safe for me for biking every day to work. Can I bring my children to their schools by using this means of transport? So all the things, okay? And then, of course, there is the maintenance and the relapse as another 2 different stages that may occur on any decision, okay? And usually, this is also true not only for decisions that we do in our everyday life, but also, for example, when we make shopping, right? It's like, for example, when we make shopping for something, we might be like, okay, thinking about personal choices and things like that, but this is not always the case. Sometimes we go to the supermarket and we say, hey, I want to buy that because I love it. I don't know why, but I need it now. Or so sometimes I wanted just to express that the way in which we take decisions, it might be sometimes random, as because we are human beings, but at the same time we follow some rules. So we have some hooks for taking decisions. Okay, and if we understand that for the different segments that we have, we can better provide nudges, or as I said before, strategies for engaging the people more on doing some actions. Okay, so now that we have understand that we are not rational, not taking decisions one-to-one, one way or the other way around, we now start on the part of the presentation in which I'm gonna say, okay, now you know the people, you know how the people take decisions, you know which are the actions that you would like to promote. Let's gonna see which are the interventions or the policy-based actions that we can do. Okay, so in the Y project, we have provided several specific interventions that might be used for different actions, but we have also again clustered them in 5 different dimensions. Okay, while the 5 different dimensions are the following ones. So the first one is like the ones based on legislative and regulatory instruments. So those legislative and regulatory instruments have some advantages and disadvantages, being the former ones that the actors are forced to comply whether they want or to not, that all actors are affected equally for the regulatory instruments, and they can improve the predictability of the public authority actions. So the compliance, it is always in place. But they have some disadvantages, such as the cost to comply are paid by the involved actors, by the way, yeah. They have a limited coping abilities in complex dynamic situations, and a change is not coming from the actors themselves, but they are more forces to comply. So the idea for these legislative and instruments is that we are not empowering people to do nothing, but we are making a more top-down approach for making changes and making transition from one stage to another. Okay, so the second one, which is very interrelated, are the economic and fiscal and tax instrument. In this second block of interventions that we can provide, there are some, again, advantages and disadvantages. The former one being market failures can be corrected, and functioning market could be theoretically created. That's nice. The disadvantages is that that creates general additional costs due overall to the subsidies, and they cause additional efforts regarding the administrative aspects of loans and taxes. So usually taxation is a nice way to go, but they implies a lot of administrative work to tax accordingly to the situations. After the big block, it is the agreement-based or cooperative instrument, in which is a more bottom-up approach, or a mix of bottom-up, top-down approaches. And the advantages is that it relies solely on the voluntary contributions on individual actors, which indicates their motivation to comply with the proposals. And the main disadvantage is that they have those big blocks. It is that the actors outside the network might not have any incentive to cooperate, or might be even opposed to the actions. And the second one is that not complying will very likely not have any consequences if no sanctions are agreed upon. So, for example, in the legislative, we are enforced or obligated, while sometimes in a more agreement or cooperative instruments, there are more flexible, which has some advantages and also some disadvantages. And the final 4 and 5 blocks of interventions, it is the one related with information and communication instruments. Here we have all the market proposal, all the nudges, all the persuasive strategies, everything which implies giving feedback to the users. And the advantages are the potential to provide information to a large group of users. So we might find very nice ways to really knock in the door of the people to really make actions. And the disadvantage is that the information does not necessarily lead to compliance. So we might receive the information, but then it is up to us to decide what we do with this information we receive. And that it will be quite challenging to reach actors sometimes, because sometimes there are a lot of constraints. There are GDPR regulations on the cocktail salad, and there are different objectives that they may hinder the communication to be effective. And the final one are the knowledge and innovation instruments, which are a final big block of the instruments. And those instruments have the advantages that they allow the involved actor to contribute with lower the resistance that they may have. They are flexible enough to cope with complex situations, because we provide knowledge to the people to then take decisions, and the involved actors will be very likely be highly motivated to participate, because they will gain not only changes but also knowledge, and they will be like more self-confident to make changes. The disadvantages that they might have is that the group of involved actors might be limited to a small group of front runners or just early adopters again, requires a high degree of cooperation and identification with the cause of all involved actors. So, well, those are the interventions that we are thinking on the Y projects, or the big blocks. Of course, within each of the different big building blocks of the instruments, there are many specific strategies, but those are like the clusters that they aggregate. So if we go for a first match, because we have the archetypes on one side, and on the other side we have the strategies. So we created in Y a list of which are the policy-based interventions that may have the most of the impact on the different characters that I have presented before. Well, I'm going to summarize that in two minutes. So the legislative and regulatory instruments are very nice for the early adopters, the Aurum Economicus, the careful, the activists, and the uninterested, because of the reasons that are already written on the presentation. The economic and the fiscal tax instruments are effective overall for the Aurum Economicus and the fearful people. The agreement-based or cooperative instruments will be always nicely according to the way in which activists, the stubborn, and the influencer things and the values that they have. The information and the communication instruments, as I say, again, everything which comes from market analysis, persuasive strategies, and similar things to that. Also, gamification and other instruments similar to them are nice for the early adopters, the influencers, the activists, and the uninterested people. And finally, the knowledge and innovation instruments, the big final building block, we found the match for the early adopters, the stubborn, and also for the activists. So the different reasons that help us to make the match were before, because of the descriptions that each of the different archetypes have over the beliefs, the values, the knowledge, the objectives, and things like that, for understanding which might be a nice way for making this match. So, for example, if in our population we have, for example, a lot of people that self-describe as Homo economicus, of course, maybe the best way to go will be to say, okay, let's gonna do top-down approaches. So economic fiscal instruments and legislative and regulatory instruments, and maybe knowledge as well. So things like that. So the way that we would like to present is that if we understand better the population and we have the interventions that we would like to promote, and we know specifically which are the actions that we would like to pursue, it is very nicely easy to link one thing to another to really create a specific interventions. To conclude, and then to leave time for Q&A, if I would be like an intervention designer and I would like to take some take-home messages from me, First of all, I would say like, let's gonna identify the target population. So for that, we can use surveys and socioeconomic data to identify the dominant archetypes in your population. Second thing, analyze the current state of change. Again, so how the people can take decisions. Understand that for the thing that we would like to change, understand in which of the different stages of the transition model that I have explained briefly before, where we are. We are in the very beginning, in the early stages. Are we very about to do the change? So depending on which change, we can apply a different intervention as well, not only based on the archetypes. So write policy-based intervention. Based on the archetypes, select the policy intervention that we might render more effective. Then implement the intervention and communicate. Roll out interventions to ensure consistent and clear communication with the end users. If we do everything where the intervention will be completely disentangled from the population, of course, that will fail. For instance, if applying economic incentives, make sure that all the stakeholders, for example, are aware of the potential benefits. Then, of course, as in any project, but I would like to re-emphasize that because it is very important to monitor, and iterate. So post-implementation, monitor of the effectiveness of the implementation should be described. Also for meta-analysis studies, that it is nice when we have really the data that we have tested. And if the desired behavioral change is not observed, iterate the strategy by plausibly combining multiple interventions or tweaking the existing ones, okay? Because what the heuristic that I have explained to you in the table before is just a first approach, but of course we are changing. We are people who change a lot of the way of thinking. We are human beings, so we are not always being an early adopter on all situations. In some situations, we might be an activist. In some situations, we might be a home economicus. In some situations, we might be different roles. So for that, not all interventions will work effectively at the first one for each of the individuals, okay? And finally, something that usually we always like to emphasize is that we have to engage with the community, because if we left the people behind, there is no real connection between the interventions and the people that will do the intervention. So especially with influencers and the activists, they can amplify the message and bring about a more significant societal shift. So if we empower some people, they can be presented as well as advocates for what we would like to make. Okay, so that was the presentation and the workshop for today. And I wanted just to finish in 1 hour to maybe have the remaining time for questions that you may have. Of course, I have not explained everything because we have done many things in the white projects, and the way in which we have do the things has not been presented. But if that presentation sparked to you some ideas, some questions, or do you would like something to share, for example, for others to take some ideas from you, I think that we can create a nice place for doing that. I'm gonna mute my mic, and if you would like to jump in, you can. But if you prefer to use the chat, of course, it's very also nice for having some questions and answers. In the meantime, I can try to ask you a question. For example, you can write on the chat if you want. For example, do you really think that you're like one of the archetypes that I have described right now in my presentation when it comes to take decisions for the energy transition? Do you feel that we are missing some archetypes or some archetypical descriptions? That may be something to start with.
If you have any questions, please.
Well, it seems that we don't have any questions, so this is okay. Again, the presentation, it is on the CERN repository, I guess. Maria Esther, I don't know whether you can maybe send again the link, that because I have already uploaded the presentation there. My email is also in the presentation, and the reference to the Y projects as well. So if you would like to have more information at some point or doing something, just so give us a message, and we will be super happy to answer you. Okay.
Yes, I will put the link again of the share folder, so you can find the slides there. And we can go on with the second presentation. There is another presentation this morning, no? Noah, are you there? There was a second presentation foreseen in the program from Noah Lufgrant.
Noah is doing a skill workshop, but it's in the parallel room.
She's in the parallel room. Ah, okay. Let me check a bit. Sorry, Dr. Armando Guayo was foreseen to present here, but he's not in the workshop.
No, Armando is not. Armando was the support of Diego Casal.
Ah, okay. So there was a mistake in the program because we foreseen two presentations. Now it's only one.
Yes.
So we should close in advance, unfortunately. Sorry for that. But the conference will continue later on. So have a look to the program and see you in parallel sessions in a while. Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.